the recording going here. Perfect. So yeah, we have Dr. Dr. Ryan Hamilton with us. At the national team level, notably working with Hockey Canada and their men's program. And of course, most recent achievement was working with the Tampa Bay Lightning on their Stanley Cup run this past couple of months. So having lived in the NHL bubble for 60 days or so, Ryan, yeah, there you go. He knows a little thing or two about resilience, I'm sure. So I will pass it over to you, Ryan. And yeah, thanks for being here. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Megan. And it's a pleasure to be here, everybody. Just going to go ahead and share my screen here. Yeah. So it's great to see everyone, and I'm mostly just seeing people's names at this point as you've turned off your cameras, but that's cool too. Be comfortable and relax, and maybe I'll make a couple of points, and if I don't, maybe you'll drift off to sleep, and sleep's also an important function and factor in resilience, so won't be offended if anybody drifts off. I don't need to hear snoring, so if your mic's muted, that's ideal. Won't injure my self-confidence too much. So we're going to talk about resilience, and I think it's like a lot of topics in sports psychology, kind of broadly, it comes at us really as it's one of these cliche kind of things. It's like, yeah, well, you have to be resilient, or yeah, we have to be mentally tough, or yeah, we have to be confident. But the idea of how to do some of those things is what gets lost often. Well, how is it that somebody can be resilient or not be resilient? So my goal tonight is to talk about a little bit about the why of resilience, a little bit about who is most likely to be resilient, but I'm really going to focus on the hows of resilience and what are some of those things that you can do to do this thing called resiliency. And when I'm even saying this word, I've already said it 9 times, probably across the 50 plus of you who are on the call so far, you probably have a different idea of what that means. You probably have a bit of a sense of, yeah, this is what you have to show when things go wrong, but what does that look like and what is that specifically? So that's my goal for tonight and what we're going to do. But I want to keep this interactive. So I'm going to ask you to ask some questions, but as questions come up, just type them into the chat. Megan's going to keep her eye on them. She promised. And hopefully we'll be able to get a chance to dig into some of your questions as well. Listening to me for an hour in person is a bit of a struggle. An hour on Zoom, it's going to be a bit of a rough ride possibly. So please, let's try to make this interactive, and I'll get to your thoughts as we're moving along. So this is, if we're wondering who I am or what I'm about, I guess one of the reasons I get invited to do webinars is because I've gotten the opportunity to hold trophies recently. If I was a part of losing efforts every time I worked, maybe I wouldn't be a resource on some of these things. So the picture, as you're looking at it on the left, is me with the World Junior trophy, and I was fortunate to be a part of a team that won gold in the Czech Republic in January. And the picture on the right is the official NHL photographers weren't following me around when I had the Stanley Cup, so I had to take a selfie of myself with the cup. But that's me with the Stanley Cup on September 29th. So I've had some opportunities here to be a part of winning teams and winning programs. But when I think about myself and I think about successes and I think about successful teams, it's not lost on me that I'm actually more this person. Like, I'm actually the guy on the far left, laying on the ground after falling off my house and waiting for the ambulance to come pick me up and wondering why I'm not tough and why I couldn't just shake it off. And I'm also the person on the right who grew up in Plaster Rock, New Brunswick. And when I had my grad pictures taken in my grad year, I had a Mickey Mouse hat, a mustache, and a wagon wheel involved in the picture. So I don't profess to be cool. I don't profess to be tough. I don't profess to be an expert. I don't profess to be successful even. I've certainly had success, and I've been a part of cultures, and I feel I've contributed to cultures that are successful. But so much of that is on a foundation of failure, of struggle, of things not always going well. And I guess to a certain extent, I've been able to have some of the successes because I've been resilient, but wasn't always that way, and things haven't always been great. So if I think about one of the most important things in my life in terms of having a career so far, I'm going to say it's failure. I'm going to say that failure stands out as being probably the most important thing that's happened. And not because it made me confident, it didn't, it rattled it. And not because it made me popular, it didn't, or opened up opportunities, it didn't. Failure was harmful in many ways, but it was also really crucially important. So I have just a small collection of my failures here. Don't worry, the list is far longer. But I remember my first ever sports site consulting presentation. For some reason, this was before PowerPoint, it was definitely before Zoom. And for some reason, I had a group of wrestlers at UNB. It was the year 2000. Most of you probably weren't alive yet. And I didn't know how to get them to sit. So I had them sit in a circle on the wrestling mat. And then I was like, well, I'm going to stand in the middle of them. And then I just kept walking around in circles trying to make eye contact with everybody, and then got dizzy and fell into a guy's lap. So that was my first kick at this can. And, I might be doing the Zoom version of falling on people's laps here, but hopefully I'll be able to hit a couple of points that make sense. I have a small collection of what's known in academic circles as PFO letters, please F off letters. Essentially when you apply for a job, but they don't think you're adequate enough to even interview, so they just send you a letter like, please F off and go apply somewhere else. I've been able to publish some articles. I've been able to, be in journals and so on, but my list of rejected articles is far longer than my list of published articles. I get to talk about winning 2 gold medals with the World Junior team, and that's a thrill in my life. But I was also a part of Team Canada's worst ever finish on home ice. I was 6th place in Vancouver just 2 short years ago. And, I was able to win a Stanley Cup this year with Tampa Bay Lightning. But I was also told by an NHL team just 7 years ago that the stuff I do is probably okay for kids, but it won't work in the NHL. So when I think about success, and when I think about resilience, and I think about adaptation to challenge, I think about the vital role it's actually played in my life. And we're going to get into some of the challenges of coping with COVID, and we're going to get into some of the challenges of just sport in general. And I see, like, when I was seeing the list pop up, like I'm seeing tennis players from Newfoundland that I know because my son plays tennis at a competitive level, and I'm seeing wrestlers who I've been working with for more than a decade, and I'm seeing coaches who have been friends and colleagues of mine for 15 years, and it's just a great mix of young athletes, experienced athletes, national level athletes, Canada game and provincial level athletes, and then excellent coaches that we're so fortunate to have spread across Atlantic Canada. So just, when I'm talking about some of these things, I think it should resonate across sports and across opportunities. And, Megan mentioned that, a month ago, I had my hands wrapped around that Stanley Cup. But even that was coming off probably the biggest collapse in the history of the National Hockey League the year before. In 2019, we were swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets in the first round of the playoffs after having the most wins in the history of the National Hockey League in a particular season. It was a collapse. and you didn't have to spend much time on social media to have the mental toughness and the resilience of the Tampa Bay Lightning be challenged. And we look back on that now fondly. We look back on it now as a part of the maturity and a part of the process of getting to where it is that we needed to get. And it's probably really, really hard right now when your season's been canceled or it's been put on hold, or when the gym you usually work out is totally changed and totally different, or the Canada Games that you were pretty sure you were going to be competing in, in about 9 months or so, and that's not on. It's not happening. It's different. It's upside down. It's postponed, and it's hard to see what some of the benefits of that might be. But I hope to walk us through that, and seeing adversity kind of as this springboard for moving us forward. So I guess what I'd like to do first, because my most recent and probably most intense sports psychology experience of my life was the 67 days I spent with the Lightning. I left home on July 26th, and I got home on around midnight on September 30th. It's probably the experience that I can draw on the most in terms of coping with difficulty, dealing with adversity. But I want to share a little bit of it. I've made a few points here in terms of some of the things, some of the adversities that we had to handle, and some of the spots where we had to show resilience. And life in the bubble, on many, and I want your questions here. So if you have questions about what it was like to be in the NHL bubble, or what were some of the difficult things there, or what were some of the fun things, or what are some of the things that we did, fire away and ask questions of Megan. But I'll just walk you through a little bit of what I was able to take account of. And I have this little blue book right here. This is my journal. And I journaled every day of life in the bubble, so it didn't just become a blur. It didn't just become, it was hard at times, but it paid off in the end. Like, you can kind of summarize things that way. Like, I've got all sorts of details in there that help. So I want to share some of this. And I want to also be clear that often it was really easy to be in the bubble. Like, I didn't have to go to the grocery store once. I didn't have to run errands and pick people up and drop them off. I didn't have to make breakfast. I had an omelet like every day because we had an omelet chef. Like, life's pretty good. I didn't have to do laundry. I just put it in a bag and some person took it away and brought it back folded. Like, it's pretty easy in many ways. And if you really looked at it on a day-to-day basis, it's like, yeah, I can do this. Like, I can handle this. This is not a big deal. But when you looked on it at an entirety basis, it became a little bit more of a weight to carry. It's kind of like when you're going through days of uncertainty about what training or practice or competition is going to look like. When you try to take on all of that at the same time, it's overwhelming. But you're like, well, how can I make the best of, like, right now, today? It doesn't feel quite as daunting. Certainly some of the things we dealt with, though, were boredom and monotony. Like, I'm a person who loves to run outside, and I was running on, every day on the same treadmill, staring at the same window, just wishing the miles would go away versus enjoying them as you go. There's repetition in food and repetition in schedule, and every day kind of looked the same at some point. And what was really obvious is the days where our players struggled the most in the bubble were when we got 2 days off in a row. It was those days off, and you know that you're not going to play for 2 more. And it became, I can't believe we're doing this. What are we waiting for? Why can't this just keep going? So that was one of the things we had to cope with, is just the amount of time that we were away, the repetitiveness of it all, and the monotony that came with it, and just this feeling of, man, I need to escape. Yeah, your social network becomes limited. Now, not that I'm the most popular person here in New Maryland, New Brunswick. Not a lot of people are knocking on my door to come hang out. But it's the same network. It's the same people. It's the same conversations every single day. And really without any way of getting around that. And over time, it became awkward and weird when you didn't see somebody for 12 or 14 hours. So it was this really sort of intimate social network, which had its positives, but also had its drawbacks. If you wanted to think about everything you couldn't do, you would drive yourself crazy, because literally there was a big black tarp around the hotel that you couldn't leave. And if you did leave, you were going to time out for 4 days. So you really couldn't leave. And you might have a favorite restaurant down the street in Toronto, but you're not going to it. And you might have a running route you love to go on Lakeshore Boulevard along Lake Ontario. You ain't running on it. And it might be that your uncle lives just around the corner. You're not going for a visit. It's just that there was the actual constraint that was there. There was obviously the absence of loved ones, and I connected with my family on FaceTime, and we chatted frequently, and I even sent letters and postcards home and got stuff back. But having that escape and that actual support, being physically present, we started to miss that. And it became harder to cope because we didn't have our regular escapes. We didn't have our regular things that we do and people we're with that love us unconditionally and help us recharge the battery. I mean, it was awkward at times running into your opponents in the elevator. Like, legit, after Dallas beat us in Game 5, we're going back to the hotel. I was on the elevator with Jamie Benn, who's one of their captain and one of their big leaders and big players. And there was just these constant reminders of your opponents. Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, was on the treadmill next to me one day. There's just these constant reminders. The refs who drive you crazy are having dinner at the table next to you in the restaurant. Like, there was just this constant proximity that early on was kind of cool, and then later on was kind of annoying. And I guess the last part is there just weren't days off. Like, it was just work every day. And especially for us as staff members in this particular case, like, we couldn't appear to be down. We couldn't appear to be distracted. And especially the mental performance person, like, I couldn't afford myself the luxury of just hiding out in my room all day. It's like, where did he go? And I couldn't afford myself the luxury of venting or complaining. I had to find the positives every day and had to model those things. So that's a little bit of life in the bubble. There are tons of cool things about it, but I just wanted to paint a little bit of a picture of some of those things that we had to cope with and deal with and show resilience to. Megan, I'll just go over to you. I'm just wondering if any questions came in about life in the bubble or anything along those lines.
No, nothing's popped up so far, but again, use the chat function if anybody has any questions, and like Ryan's doing right now, we'll stop periodically to check in.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll just leave it for maybe another minute on this topic, and if nothing comes in, I'll get in and start digging into the COVID piece specifically. It was 2 months ago today. We won a playoff game against the, no, it's not. This is the day after we won a playoff game against the Boston Bruins, and today was the day that the NHL went on pause. So we were in the bubble, but we went on pause in recognition of the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States and in Canada, in recognition of what was another incident of police brutality and murder of a Black man in the US. And the NBA had gone on, had sort of halted play the day before. We played that night, and our players were criticized heavily. That night we met. We have a Black player on our team, a guy named Matthew Joseph, and we have two Black coaches, Jean from Moncton and Nigel Kerwin, and we met. We got back for dinner at around 11:30, so we ate at 11:30 at night, and we sat and we talked, and we had a big open forum meeting on those issues until after 2 in the morning. And even when I left at around 2, guys were still hanging out and talking about those things. And so 2 months ago today, the NHL went on pause. A couple of our players, Braden Coburn and Luke Shen, were in front of the media and just represented the issues, our team and the league so admirably. And we were spending a ton of time as a staff, trying to figure out what the right approach was in terms of, do we meet tonight? If we do meet tonight, do we talk about hockey or do we not? How do we make sure we're ideally prepared for tomorrow? But within recognition of everything that's going on. So it's just another one of those instances of things that happen in the bubble that we had to deal with. Megan, just quickly, anything come in, or should I keep on?
We do have 2 questions that came in. So the first were, what were the most common topics or issues that you met with players about while in the bubble?
Awesome. It's funny, like, especially early on, the meetings didn't look like normal meetings at all. We talked a lot about, and I'm speaking about individual meetings right now, but there was, there were feelings of, do I really want to be here? Like, is this really smart? How is my family going to make out? This could last for as much as 2 months. Like, I'm going to miss a lot, and people did miss a lot of things. And so getting people's heads sort of accustomed to loss, like some of the things that they're going to miss out on, like that was a very real part of it. There were some tensions amongst staff, and it's like, man, there's just nowhere to go. There's nowhere else to vent. So I was meeting with staff members who I rarely even spoken to about some of the things that they were going through, and just trying to negotiate being together and being with each other all the time. As it went along, it was coping with the boredom and the monotony, and what ended up happening, especially as we got closer and closer to possibly winning the cup, was the pressure really increased. And there was a very poignant day. It was before Game 6 against the Islanders, and our strength and conditioning coach came and grabbed me from sort of our team complex at the rink, and he said, you got to come with me. And I went out with him, and a player I'd been working with for years was down the hallway away from our complex, and he was in the throes of a panic attack. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know if I can play. And he was sobbing and crying and beside himself. And we kind of worked through it, and he played that game and played brilliantly in the game. But the next day we met and talked about it. And it was just a matter of, and this was with a number of guys I was meeting with at the end, it's just the battery wasn't getting recharged. Like, there's so much to cope with. Being away, missing out on things, monotony and boredom, but then the pressure of, I got to perform at like a world-class level, and the coping tank just wasn't getting topped up. And so we talked a lot about sleep. We talked a lot about mindfulness and meditation. And then we talked about just doing things to feel connected to loved ones. So those were some of the issues. And when I was meeting with the team as a whole, we just talked a ton about our values. And our 4 values were resilience, sacrifice, gratitude, and trust. And those 4 words shaped just about every meeting that I had with the team over our 2 months together.
That's great. Thanks, Ryan. And this one is very connected, and you may have already touched on it, but if there's anything more to it. So was a part of your role to help support the athletes navigate their daily lives and their new norms within the bubble? And if yes, what were some of the strategies you used?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about meditation in the context of this presentation more largely. So meditation was a big part of things. So we do a lot of stuff on sleep and sleep hygiene and best sleep practices. So that was it. We did a thing. We did a lot of things, but we bought digital photo frames for everyone's room that family members could upload photos to whenever they wanted to. And so the link got passed amongst friends and family, and we would prompt friends and family to put up new pictures. So new pictures were coming in. We collected videos from families before every round of the playoffs, and then we had a nice edited video of hometown shout outs. So everybody was seeing everybody else's family members wishing us all good luck. We gave every player on the team 2 postcards in Toronto and 2 postcards in Edmonton, so that they could write a message to somebody at home and to feel connected to them. We changed up our meal plans as often as we could. We had our guys sort of take over the kitchen and go back and hang out with the chef and come up with new meal ideas. We were doing as much as we could to sort of keep things fresh. We, with each round of the playoffs, we gave them, and it became a bit of a joke, like I became the soap guy, but we would order like different soaps and different shampoos and so on, just to make it different in the room, that it could feel different. We gave different books. We ordered board games. We did a survey to get everybody's snack preferences and made sure that every player received like their favorite kind of snacks. We had cribbage tournaments and pickleball tournaments, and we were doing everything we could to keep that environment as fresh and as stimulating as we could as we went along it. And then like the mental skills we talked about, I wasn't introducing new mental skills. I've been a part of the organization for 6 years. So it was reminders around mindfulness, reminders around positive self-talk. And then the last piece of it is I was a safe place for guys to vent. They knew that I was going to respect and uphold their confidentiality. And so they could come and get some things off their chest, like, I don't really want to be here anymore. And that was a safe place because I would never tell anybody on the staff or anything about those types of encounters. So thanks for the questions, guys. I'll just keep it rolling along here because we do want to get into these strategies. And if anything comes up now as you're thinking about COVID and maybe the unique challenges it's presented to you, like please throw those things out here now. But I guess some of the things that I've run into and working with athletes during COVID, and it's affected all of us in sort of myriad ways. But cancellations are certainly a part of it. Cancellation of major events, qualification events, cancellations of things that maybe you set out as a goal 2 or 3 years ago, like, yeah, I'm going to be a Canada Games athlete, or I'm going to be a friggin' Olympian, and you're well on your way to doing that. And then boom, it's paused, and what's going to happen, and then it's canceled or at least postponed for a long period of time. I know that's been hard. It's been hard because there's a sense of loss and grieving that comes with that, and it's also hard from a motivational standpoint, like, how do I keep it going if it's been, like, when's it going to start again? And the uncertainty piece has probably been, you know, the thing that I've helped athletes with the most, adjusting to different kinds of training and different training plans and different training environments, locations, making the best of what you might have at home. There's an extra burden of the COVID protocols now and all the different ways that sport has to be administered. And then, you know, maybe some of the things that you're used to doing and being able to do to escape and to relax and to unwind, some of that stuff just isn't available to you anymore. So when I think about some of the adversities that we're facing right now and that you're facing right now, these are some of those things that pop up. I'm wondering if anybody has sort of an individual context to it, or things that they would add to this list, like, you know, what else makes it difficult to be an athlete or to be a coach right now in the times of COVID. And here in Atlantic Canada, clearly we've done well at handling a lot of this, but clearly handling it well doesn't exempt us from loss and doesn't exempt us from complications and adversity. Megan, any other things come in that maybe I could speak to?
Not so far.
No? Okay. Well, if things come up, just I'll come back to you and we'll collect them as we're going along.
Yeah, sounds good.
So the thing about adversity, I think from a front of brain standpoint, So when we're just sort of using our thinking brain up here, we can think about adversity as like, yeah, like everybody needs a bit of adversity in your life. Like nobody talks about their keys to success in their life of, yeah, everything was handed to me. Everything was super easy. I didn't really have to work for anything. And whenever things didn't look like they were going to go my way, like my parents totally intervened and took all the difficulty away. And that's why I'm a champion. Like not a lot of people, that's not the story. People really tend to think about, yeah, I had to go through this hardship and that hardship in order to get to where I am today. And so it feels like, yeah, you know what? Everybody does need to go through some tough times. It's going to teach them things. It's going to show them where they need to improve. It's going to test them and challenge them and make them recommit. And it's going to drive them. So I think when we're thinking about it, especially when we're thinking about it hypothetically, it's like, yeah, everybody needs to go through that stuff. Seems like a great idea. The problem is when we're going through it. Like when we're actually in adversity, we're not just thinking about it anymore, hypothetically, we are in it. And when we're in things, especially when we're in things that are difficult, there's an emotional reaction that comes along with that. Like, this sucks, this is frustrating, this isn't fair, this shouldn't be happening, I'm getting screwed, this is wrong. What if I don't get back? What if I don't improve? What if I don't recover from the injury? What if the sport never comes back the way it's supposed to? What if I don't get another chance? And the more you start to experience it that way, it feels really, really terrible. And sometimes we don't respond particularly well to that. And sometimes that experience is the thing that shoves us away from the sport, shoves us towards a new interest, makes us say it's too hard, it's too difficult, and it's not worth it. And you know what? Sometimes that's the right answer. Sometimes, you know what? Maybe it just isn't worth it anymore. But for the people who it is worth it for, the people who really do have these clear goals, this is the kind of experience that we need to figure out how to make work for us, how to survive within it, and then possibly how to thrive within it. But it happens differently for different people. And so when I think about people who handle adversity well, who go through a difficult time and come out of it stronger, that's where the term resilience comes in. And I want to sort of describe to you then what it means to be resilient. So someone who is resilient tends to recover from difficulties fairly quickly. So that's not to say that the resilient don't experience difficulties, don't get down, don't get frustrated, don't get pissed, don't get anxious, don't get overwhelmed, don't cry in their bedroom at night. Resilient people do all that stuff too. It's the shelf life on that reaction that's different. And for the resilient person, that experience ends fairly quickly. So resilience then is recovering quickly from difficulties. It's kind of like a form of mental toughness. Probably the point I like the most when I think about resilience, when I was talking to the Lightning throughout our playoff run, this is what we said often: it's a positive adjustment to a stressful or negative event. And I think, COVID across the board, no matter how big or small we might think about it now, I think it's been a stressful event for everyone because it's created change. Change is a source of stress. It's created doubt and uncertainty, another source of stress. And as we start to build up stressors, well, this is stuff that we have to handle. And so when we're resilient, we make a positive adjustment to that event. We see it, we acknowledge it. Man, the tennis center's shut down for 2 months. What can I do with this? Like, how can I keep it up? How can I keep pushing forward? Or it's, man, the competition's been canceled for 8 months. Like, how am I supposed to get drafted? Like, how am I supposed to get recruited to an NCAA school? What's my pathway to here? How am I going to make it from here? And so that stressful event hits, but the resilient adjust to it in a way where they either mitigate the majority of that effect, or they actually use it as a way of propelling themselves forward. Resiliency is getting through pain, disappointment, and stress with your identity intact. And so even when things aren't going our way, cancellations, uncertainty, tons of adjustments, can we stay true to who we are as athletes? Can we stay true to our values and what does it mean to be me in this sport? Like, who am I as a wrestler even when I can't wrestle? And who am I as a basketball player even when there aren't any games to be played? And who am I as a paddler when the Canada Games are postponed for a year? And can I still be those things? Can I still be hardworking? Can I still be grateful? Can I still be coachable? And if we can rely on those values, it facilitates this resiliency. We can become more resourceful as we go through it. And I have athletes now who are far better at meditating than they've ever been in their life. And I have athletes who are better able to reframe a negative situation than ever before. And I have athletes who now have skating coaches that they reached out to and had their technique analyzed, and they never would have reached out before. Within constraint, there's actually a ton of opportunity if we choose to search and find it. And so while that holds true for an individual, it also holds true for teams, for workplaces, and for cultures. So here's the resilience model, if you will. Something goes down, it's not positive, it's kind of stinky, and it gets in our way, and then we're gonna process it. And typically when that thing is a negative thing, we're gonna process it initially negatively. Like, it's hard to say, you go out for a run in the woods later, probably not tonight, but you go for a run in the woods tomorrow, you step in a rut, you roll your ankle over and sprain your ankle, and you're out of training for a month. It's hard to say, oh man, I'm so glad, like, been so curious about rehabbing sprained ankles. You're saying this while you're laying on the ground. Probably not. We're gonna have a reaction to it. And our reaction is gonna be driven by how we process it. And people respond to adversity in three main ways. The first is with anger, with panic, with frustration, with desperation. There's like this kind of lashing out that might happen. And so when we're in the throes of that adversity, we're just angrier, we're bitter, there's resentment. It's kind of a whole bunch of negative stuff that's directed outwards at everything and everyone else. But another way that people respond to adversity is not lashing out, it's kind of lashing in. We kind of implode upon ourselves with negative emotions, we get numb, we feel overwhelmed, we freeze up, we can't get ourselves started. We tell ourselves, yeah, it's gonna be tomorrow, or it's gonna be next week. That's when I'm gonna get going again. We just fail to make an adjustment. And that allows us or forces us to get stuck. And for the resilient person, it's not extreme positivity. It's actually, there can be a degree of bitterness and a degree of doubt, but it's just being more realistic about what's happening and then noticing how we're experiencing it and then saying, okay, this is the problem. I see it, I've got it, I have a handle on it. Now, what do I do about it? What do I do with it? Well, how can I propel myself forward even though this is happening? And so this happens in sort of short-term adversity. You turn the ball over late in the fourth quarter, the opponent goes down and scores a layup, and now you're down by 2 with 30 seconds to go. How do you handle that adversity? You give up a bad goal to cause the game to get tied with a minute left. How do you handle that adversity? So there are these short-term adversities that we have to process, but then there are also these sort of bigger picture adversities that we have to handle. And the fact that all of you folks are on this call tonight would suggest to me that you've actually been handling COVID fairly well. We're months and months and months into it, and we probably all had some pretty dark and brutal moments during all of it. Yet here you are looking for something or participating in something That's about continuing the process forward. And maybe you wouldn't have reached out to or take part in a seminar like this if the Canada Games wouldn't have been canceled. Maybe now's the time you get exposed more to sports psych, and you're going to look up somebody in your community to start working on these skills. Like maybe this is an impetus for further coping, and you become more resourceful, and that's the nature of resilience. Before I continue, Megan, I'm just going to throw back to you for a second and just see if there are any questions or thoughts that have come in while I've been ranting on here for 10 minutes.
Nope, there's nothing coming in so far.
Okay. How many people, tell me this, how many people have left the seminar in the last 10 minutes?
Nobody.
Well, okay.
More people have shown up. Word's getting out.
Word's spreading across the countryside. Like, make sure you show up for the 30 minutes of this.
I don't know though. That last slide, that picture you had there was not particularly appealing. So maybe that pushed a couple of people out.
Okay. I'm going to skip this slide. Now, this slide for many of you might look really interesting, and it is, and it's a part of a course that I teach, but I can't stay with it because I want to get to more of the actionable stuff. But this slide will be distributed, and you'll be able to read through this and look at this. And if people have questions on this at the end, I'm willing to hang out and answer questions as long as you want to hang out. But for the benefit of everybody, I'm gonna skip over this one for now. So resilience is a few different things. Like, on the one hand, we can think about resilience as a trait. Like, it's kind of something we have. Like, people vary, if you were to have them fill out a questionnaire, and how hardy they are, and how gritty they are, and how mentally tough they are. So there's a bit of a trait piece to this. But for me, that's not all that helpful, because there's also a skill and process piece to this. So I like to think about resilience more as a process than as a trait. Like, ooh, those people over there are resilient, they're going to make it. Those people over there aren't resilient, they won't make it. Because there's room to grow and change when it comes to all of this sort of stuff. It's kind of like if you have a bit of a weak knee. Now, do all people with weak knees, so they just stop playing a sport because their knee is weak? No. They should do things to strengthen their knee, right? And to make up for that weakness or that deficiency. And it's the same with being resilient. Like, these are skills that we can work on. So I could talk for a long time about this particular slide, but I kind of want to approach it this way. I want to talk about what is an above the line response to adversity versus what's a below the line response to adversity. And we're allowed to have all of this in us, right? Like, we're allowed to get down and dwell on things that haven't gone well in the past. And we're allowed to feel panicked and anxious at times. And we're allowed to be afraid or to have human reactions when things go wrong. But to my point before, it's also our duty to ourselves and to our teammates to try to choose to respond with more resiliency. So these are things that I would have talked to the Lightning about throughout the season last year, and these are things that I continue to talk to groups about going forward, because we were sort of had this, there was an external and internal impression of our team that we weren't resilient. We didn't handle adversity well. So it was a big part of the work I did with the team last year, and we drew on all of these different pieces. So starting at the left, one of the ways to respond to adversity is to panic, is to pant, is to vent, is to lash out, is to go internal. And that's how we might feel sometimes. But another way is to be aware of how we're feeling, to sort of breathe and come back to where we are, and then to choose to do something that's helpful, to choose to do something that is actually going to move us towards an outcome or a result that we want. And so we have this ABC process: awareness, breath, and choice. So you become aware of the negative experience you're having, you become aware of the negative situation you're in, but you don't dump all of your emotional energy into it. Sort of breathe to be in the moment with it, and then you choose to take an action. You choose to just bump yourself forward. You choose to do something that's consistent with where you want to go versus where it is you're stuck. And that's an important process. And I'm really simplifying it. But we connect this with a lot of teams that I work with. We connect this to our mindfulness work and our meditation work. And athletes who respond well to adversity, especially sort of moment to moment adversity, something that happens on the soccer pitch, something that happens in the midst of the tennis match, something that happens in the baseball game. The athletes that really respond well are those who are better versed in noticing where their head and where their emotions are going. And where does that skill come from? It comes from practicing meditation. As an organization this year, Tampa meditated for over 8,000 minutes. So when we add up everybody's meditation, we keep track of it on an app. We had over 8,000 minutes of meditation. It's a part of our process. It's the same way that having workouts with our strength coach is something that we do. Regular meditation is something that we do. And many of you might say, oh my God, I tried meditation. My mom made me do it. Or yeah, I got the Calm app for free, a free 1-month trial, and I'm not very good at it, or I suck at it. I always get distracted. So give me the next sports psych skill, please, because this one doesn't work. That's a little bit like saying to your strength coach, yeah, I suck at squats. So can I work on my biceps instead? Well, you can, but you're not going to get better at squats. So I really resist, yeah, I'm not very good at that skill, so I'm not going to do it. Not being good at the skill is the reason you have to do it. And you'll really benefit from it. And there's great free programming, and you might not know totally what it is, but I think people who are able to stop negative momentum, to get out of ruts, to adjust positively to a negative event, who are resilient, are well-versed in that skill. Another thing I think is when things are wrong, things are canceled, things are uncertain, the ump has to stand behind the pitcher instead of behind the catcher for your baseball season, or volleyball practice looks weird because you're only allowed 4 on each side of the court, or whatever might be going on. It is so easy to just describe everything that's wrong and could be better and what it was like in the good old days in February. But that's not helpful. And while it's natural, it's also important to really think about what you're grateful for in the situation you might be finding yourself. And so we spent so much time, and it was evident in my first week with the Lightning in the bubble that despair and complaining and venting was a part of who we were in the early stages. And that's when I, and with the support of the coaches, decided to start talking about gratitude every time I was in front of the team. Like, let's think about things we're grateful for right now. Like having the chance to pursue the cup, which we ultimately won. Like having the chance to come together and be together as a group and pursue dreams and get the chance to keep playing, get the chance to earn your next contract, and thinking about, well, we actually do have great restaurants we can go to, and we can go over to BMO Field and frolic on the grass over there every day and play whatever sport we can. Like, we're in summer camp here. Like, and finding those things to be grateful for is really, really important. And so maybe it is the fact that you can't train or compete the way that you'd like to be doing it right now. But man, what a great chance to rehab that knee injury that's been nagging at you for your last 2 seasons. Like, what are those things that we can be grateful for, even in the midst of a period of time, which I think we'll all look back at as being, fairly negative. And I was on the phone last night with one of our draft picks, and he was just talking about, this is the first time I've been with my family in years. I left home at a really young age. I haven't really seen my family in the last 3 years, and now I've been with them for a number of months, and that's been awesome. We can focus on our failures and more things that are wrong, and sometimes misery loves company because we allow misery to go find company. I think it's important when we're in an adverse situation, even if it's not the same situation, to think about how we came out of it. Like, there are so many of you who have come back from a major injury and have had success. And there are things that you had to do when you were going through that injury that got you back on the right track. And it's important to draw on that. And there are some of you here who have been cut from teams in the past, and then you came back and made the team the next year. And drawing on your response to that is important. And so thinking about times where you've handled adversity successfully is critical in helping you handle adversity now. So I really believe that to be the case. So we can dwell on our past failures, but it's important to pull on those past successes we've had. Embracing the process on a daily basis, I think, is incredibly important. If you have to take on all the various challenges that might unfold and the uncertainties of the next month or 2 months or 3 months that are ahead, it can feel pretty overwhelming, but there's typically nothing that we can't handle in a particular day. So let our focus sort of be in the day-to-day things that we need to do. I think the biggest reason that we got swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets 2 years ago in the playoffs is that people pushed apart when adversity hit. We had a dream season. We won 4 major awards for individual play. We set records, individual records and team records. We pushed for those records. We clinched the playoffs early. We clinched first in the league early. I have a trophy up on my thing that's for the best regular season team. And we hit no adversity. And then when it did hit, everybody responded this way. I've got to do it. That's got to be me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to lead us through it. And what was important this year was it wasn't about one person doing it. It was about everybody doing it together. And then the last thing on here, the above the line sort of responsibility to adversity is the win. What's important now versus the fear. False expectations appear real, right? So we can come up with these stories we might tell ourselves that can feel very real. Like, we could make up a story about how the Olympics aren't going to be what they're supposed to be or what they should have been, or how we might get screwed out of the selection process. Or we could think about how, if Canada Games would have happened this summer, yeah, we would have had a great chance to win a medal, but if they'd have happened the summer after, we're going to be screwed. Like, you can do that sort of stuff, but it's all a psychological exercise. Like, it's just time traveling. It's like if you could time travel, you do it, but then you're like, no, I don't want to go to the future. I want to go to like the worst version of the future. It's not a positive place to be when you're trying to be productive now. And so when you find yourself thinking about how this situation is going to turn into all these extra bad situations going forward, just come back to the win. Like, what's important right now? So those are some strategies and that I think are important to keep in mind among all that we're experiencing. I'm going to skip this, Megan. I'm going to go to the conclusion, and then I can open it up for questions. So I had a couple of other slides here, but this being the first time I've ever done this talk, I'm over time. But I did circle back to the failures because I, as I said off the top, I think my failures are fundamental to any success I've been fortunate enough to experience. So, a few things we have in common at this point in time. We've all survived every adversity we've faced. And for some of us, we have the scars to prove it. Some of your scars might be physical. Some of them might be emotional. You might be able to think back to some miserable times that you've had, but yet here you are, forging forward. Here you are, with rich experiences on going through difficult things. And we all have those things. And I think looking back in 5 years, there will be some of you on this call, whether you're playing collegiate tennis or whether you've won an Olympic medal or whether you've made a national team or you're coaching at the Commonwealth Games or whatever it might be, I can say with confidence that you'll look back at 2020 and say, that's a big reason I'm here. I'm confident in that because we're going to survive this thing too. We're going to have our bad moments and we're going to have ongoing challenges, but it is those features of resilience that I think will propel us forward. And I think these will be shaping experiences. And when I've had these major setbacks in my life, and I have that when, you turn on Sports Center and they say, this is the worst ever finish for the World Junior team. It wasn't like, oh shit, like I'm glad this happened. Like I feel awesome right now. And this is so special. No, but it did provide the impetus for change and renewed effort and creativity and thinking. And when people told me I had to go in a bubble, and if we were really successful, I'd be there for more than 2 months away from my family, and I'd miss the end of baseball season, and I'd miss my daughter's birthday for the 5th straight year, and miss my anniversary, and I'd miss out on all these things. It was hard for me to say, yeah, this is great, but I believe being in the bubble helped us become the kind of team that we needed to become. I am so grateful for the bubble at this point in time because it hardened us early. It taught us about brotherhood and commitment and gratitude and resilience. And I kept track of all, like for the first month, I kept track of every sort of incident of adversity that we hit and how we handled it. And I kept telling our team about it time and time again, to the point I didn't have to say it anymore. We weren't being resilient anymore. We just were it. We had become it. So I think that's stuff that we have in common. So it's not easy to do. It's not easy to handle adversity. It can be overwhelming, and you all have permission to cry, to vent, to be upset, to get down. Like it's all good. But you also have permission to come out of it. You also have permission to adjust to it and make the most of it. Because as you build those skills, they become more habitual over time. And eventually resilience is this thing that you did and will continue to do versus this thing you had to figure some stuff out about. So I'll stop there, Megan, and then I will just open it up for questions. And as I said, I'm willing to stay here as long as anybody else is.
Yeah, that's awesome, Ryan. Thanks so much. We did have one other question come in the chat. And an indication that she thinks it might have been answered already. So Michelle, I'll let you unmute if you want to follow up on it at all. But sort of how do you recommend people without resources, I would infer without resources like people like you, go through the resilience process of identifying the problem and deciding how to move forward productively?
Ryan, I think you answered it pretty much with that chart there, but maybe one thing for individuals without resources, any worksheets, any apps or things that Instagram groups that you can recommend for our young student athletes to follow?
So I'll recommend a book that one of the things that we did while in the bubble is we provided lots of books. We had set up a library for our players, and then we gave some books to every player, each round of the playoffs. But one of the books I thought really resonated with our athletes. It's a fairly straightforward book, but it touches on a lot of what I talked about here. It's called Chop Wood, Carry Water. Simple little parables, super easy read. And it's just got some really nice messaging in it. So I think that's a good resource. Apps like Calm and Headspace. Headspace is what we use, and we have a license agreement with the Lightning. That's been a tremendous resource. Now, it's something that you have to pay for. I think a yearly subscription at this point is around $70 US, which is pretty expensive for an app, but it's pretty cheap for a psychologist. So it's one way of looking at it. There's tremendous programming in that. And some of it, some of the programming is with the younger audience in mind. But even if you don't want to pay for the app, there's some great free features in that. There's another app called Stop, Breathe, and Think, another mindfulness app. There's a million of them because companies feel like they can make money off of these apps, and they clearly can. But Stop, Breathe, and Think has a lot of free programming in it as well. So the idea is to get some background on mindfulness, which these programs provide, and then it's to start to establish that practice. And it doesn't always have to be guided by someone else. It's kind of like, you know, if I go to physio for an injury that I have, the physio really guides me and positions my body and shows me what I need to do and provides me with the band and so on. And I keep going back, especially early on, for check-ins to make sure I'm doing everything right. And then maybe I'll have a checkup like once every 6 months or something. But I mostly just lay on the floor by myself with the band and work myself through the exercises. And I think athletes can do those things. And I think coaches are great resources too. And I think coaches should feel free to trust a lot of your instincts on some of the things that you know about and are informed about in supporting those athletes. There's some great YouTube videos out there as well. And so lots of things to draw upon to get started. For me, if a young athlete can meditate for 3 to 5 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week, that's a really good start.
Great.
Any other questions out there?
I've got one while we've just got the chat box is still open, so feel free. But Ryan, I'm just wondering, you know, for those of us who have children, you know, it's mostly athletes and coaches on the call, but some of us may have children who are, you know, potentially experiencing a lot of what you talked about. Would you have any sort of unique advice for parents specifically that differs from what you would give athletes or coaches?
Okay, help me again, Megan. So the question is, it's not about what to do with your children, it's about what to do with yourself.
I don't know what to do with your children. Yeah.
Well, I mean, clearly it depends on age a little bit in terms of what they're able to think about and handle. And I draw on the research, right? It's like that's what informs this presentation, right? Like you might sit in this presentation like that felt like it wasn't very complex, and I hope it felt that way, but it's driven by research. And I guess some of the things that I think are really important is to normalize that things are difficult sometimes, like is to talk about and even to talk about the things that you might struggle with. So maybe your child is going through a tough time, or they're struggling to get something, or they're struggling to figure out math, or, you know, they didn't make a youth basketball team, or whatever it might be. And I think a couple of things is to normalize struggle. Like this is what life can be like sometimes, and we get to learn from it and choose how we learn from it and what we learn from it. I think that's important. I think the feedback that we give to children around growth is really, really important. So, you know, when something goes wrong or something is difficult, it's not an audit on whether or not they're good or worthy or their dreams will come true. It's just an indication of where they are in one moment of time, and it's informative in terms of where they can go next and what they can do next. So I do my best to reinforce effort, to reinforce risk taking. And I don't mean risk taking like jumping out of a tree necessarily. I encourage some of that too. But I mean like doing things that make you uncomfortable and showing up again. And you know, and I catch myself in this sometimes, like I'm watching my son play play high school baseball this year, and he comes up in the bottom of the 7th inning and they're down by 1, and there's a part of me like thinking, oh my God, I hope he doesn't have to bat, like, because what if he has to bat and he fails, like what are other people going to think, or how's he going to feel, or what's it going to be? And I find myself in that trap, and I'm like, no, hell no, like this is where I want him to be, and this is where I want him to want to be. And it's like being in those situations, I think it's something worth encouraging. So, any risk that's taken, I think we celebrate, just to normalize sort of tension and anxiety as being a part of life too. So that's just some of the things that, but I think showing our kids things that we struggle with, and we're not perfect parents or perfect employees or partners or whatever, and where we have room to grow, I think that makes it okay, because many children think their parents are superheroes. Not in my house, but you look, Megan, you probably look pretty invincible.
I don't think so. We had one more pop up, just the 4 values that the team had while in the bubble. Just a reminder on what those were.
Yep. I'll just elaborate briefly. So one was gratitude, right? So we're grateful for every situation that we're going to find ourselves in. And we're even grateful, we're grateful when we're anxious. We're grateful when there's a lot at stake. We're grateful when we're under pressure. We're grateful when we have to have another meal together in the same room. And it's not about lying to yourself. It's just about searching for what part of this is actually pretty cool. Because it turns out it's hard to be afraid and grateful of the same thing. Like, it's hard to be afraid of something that you're grateful for. So when my heart is pounding, 5 hours before puck drop, it's not like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. Or, oh my God, I shouldn't be here. It's, oh my God, this is special. Like, I'm grateful that I'm anxious. I'm grateful that I have the chance to do this. I'm grateful that I'm taking these risks. So gratitude is huge. The next one was sacrifice. So we talked about sacrifice a lot early on, just sort of as the thing that was uniting everyone in the room. Like, everything was uncertain in terms of how things might go. Like, we didn't know if the playoffs were going to get interrupted or stopped or what the heck was going to happen. But the thing that is that we're all making the same sacrifice. Like, you could sit in the room at breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and you knew that the person next to you was also missing home, also was giving things up, also was stuck and constrained in the same way. And so we talked about that as something to celebrate. And it really it eventually evolved to a conversation around brotherhood. And we had women with us too, but we talked about sort of brotherhood more globally, and being shared sacrifice and shared purpose. And that became important. But we also talked about sacrifice because not everybody was getting to play. Some people were scratched, and we talked about how hard that was. Some people were getting injured. Some people were putting their faces in front of hockey pucks. So we talked about sacrifices being just a part of our identity. So gratitude, sacrifice, resilience, obviously, we captured those moments early. We didn't have to talk about it much late, except to just reinforce to everybody, we're the most resilient friggin' team here. Like, our first game was 5 overtimes against the team that swept us the year before. Like, who's more resilient than us? So, but that kind of faded in its importance. And trust was huge. Trust the process, trust your teammates, trust yourself. And probably the thing that we talked about the most late was trusting the process. So, and it really became attack the process, surrender the outcome. Like, we can't control any of this outcome, surrender it, give it up to fate, and let's just attack and trust our process. And in the second intermission, in our cup clinching game, I'm privy to the speech that the coach is giving, and his words were great. He's like, we've invested in this process for 2 periods so far, not so that we can fantasize about the outcome now. Like, let's continue to invest and attack this process, surrender the outcome, and let's just stay on the attack. And I thought it was sage advice. So those were the 4. Thanks for the question, Lily.
Yeah. Ryan, if I could just follow up on that one. Sorry, I'm the one who's keeping you here, but how did you guys go about the process of determining those? Like, was it a team effort kind of over the course of the season, or, were they sort of imposed upon the team and then you built the buy-in, or?
So we've gone through various iterations of mission statements and standards and team values, and the words that are painted on our walls back at Amalie Arena are fearlessness, accountability, integrity, tenacity, humility. Humility comes up with gratitude, but the rest of it wasn't really there. So, and why wasn't it there? Well, those words were painted on the wall 3 years ago, and they didn't mean anything. And so, what we came up with was pretty context specific, and what we really tried to do was focus on those things that we thought would be important. But we were not driving it down the athletes' throats, really. It's not like we had T-shirts with the words put on it. But when I spoke to the team, these were the values that I communicated about, and I really positioned them as these are the things we're going to rely on and draw from to get us through our difficult times that might be ahead. So they were all things that we had talked about in various forms in the past. We just chose to shine the light on them a little bit brighter, I guess, and they evolved a little bit as we went along. But I'm not even sure that the athletes could recite what they were right now. Like they'd probably say process over outcome, and they might say gratitude, right? Like, but who knows what they'd actually remember. But the words were driving our work. Like they were driving the work of the staff and the psychological climate we were trying to create. Now, my experience with Hockey Canada is much different because we really partner with our athletes in developing a slogan and also in developing our values. And we survey, like this summer, we sent a survey to everybody we invited to our virtual summer camp with what they thought were the key values, traits, characteristics of winning teams. And so then we put this list together, and then we went to all of our returners from the year before and said, which one of these do you think resonate? And then what we did is we assigned, during our virtual camp, we assigned there were 4 groups, and we gave them each a word, and then they had to put together a 10-minute presentation on the word. Like, these athletes know the values, they develop them, and it's going to be just up to us to remind them of it. So that's a totally different process. And I think it's kind of the process that you can engage with a national team or a provincial team that's together for a shorter period of time versus, a group of professionals who are together, 8 months of the year and have low tolerance for anything that's not hockey specific or sport specific.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I'm going to put the last call out there. If there's any other questions, I invite you to unmute or raise your hand or use the chat function if you'd like. Going once, going twice. All right. Perfect. Well, thank you, Ryan, so much for this. So interesting and so helpful. And many, many thanks for coming in the chat as you were answering the questions as well from the people who were on the call. So I appreciate this greatly. And yeah, thank you to all of you for coming and hanging out with us on your Wednesday evening. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks very much, everyone. It's great to